Hello everyone. Thanks for attending this webinar on identity and access management. This will be just an overview webinar. Here's our agenda. We're going to go with an introduction. We're going to talk about what identity and access management or IAM is and why we need it and the features of IAM, the typical features, and what deployment options are there currently, and then also the traditional leading vendors. I'm going to show some of the Gartner's Magic Quadrants for IAM, as well as we have some time for Q&A. So it's an introduction. BizTech's, my name is Al Abbas, and I'm from BizTech's Risk and Security Practice. And since this is a webinar, we'll skip on the attendee introduction section. So what is identity and access management? To start with, what is a digital identity? So basically, an identity, it's a digital identity or a digital representation of a user in a system. Basically, it's your login uh, that you need to access your systems. Why identity and access management? So I think in the previous slide, what we need to describe a little more is what is identity and access management, and the way we describe it is we go into details of why we need it and the features that are in there. Identity description we've given, and access management is how you manage access to various systems. And we're going to describe more in detail of how it's done, the features that uh, a dedicated identity and access management solution would have. So the most basic form is to have a user directory or an LDAP. Active, many organizations have active directory. Others have Oracle Directory Server Enterprise Edition. Now they're moving into the new version, which is Oracle Unified Directory. So the reason people use directories is that directories are optimized for searches, whereas databases are all optimized for updates. So databases are not always optimized for searches. There are common relational databases that are there. So, okay, now why do we need identity and access management? So we need to manage the user identities and access control to the different systems we have. And a dedicated identity and access management system helps you do that more efficiently. Overall, it helps you reduce costs, and the way it reduces cost is by it reduces the cost for each application to code authentication details. So authentication is when basically a user logs in. You are verifying if the user is who he or she says they are. Um, and authorization is when you're trying to see if an authenticated user, so you verify the user, but every user cannot access everything. You need to make sure that only a user who's authorized, that's authorization part. Let's say um, marketing user should not be able to access HR information. So the marketing user will be on the network, and it will be an authenticated user on the network when they go into Windows login, but they should not be able to access an application that is, or let's say in a very simple, so let's say they have a SharePoint um, folder that's owned by human resources. So an authenticated marketing user should not be able to access human resource folders. So again, that's where the authorization comes in. So that's the difference between authentication and authorization. So when you're developing, the folders was a very simple example, but when you're developing new applications, you don't want to have, you don't want to code the access management and authentication and authorization internally within each application. Maybe you can have like just a very fine-grained authorization or access control in the application, but general authentication and high-level authorization should not be within the applications. So, and the reason for that is you need some standardization, you need some conformity. Every other development team that is developing things should not um, create their own security policies, and usually developers are not security people. They will not be able to have um, within their own applications have security as good as a centralized security application. And again, you don't want to have 10 applications being built, each developing their own authentication, where they can just use one dedicated authentication or identity and access management system. So again, it automates identity provisioning. So identity management. So there's the identity management and there's the access management part. So identity management part is where you're creating user IDs, passwords. So identity management system automates that function where you've defined roles and you're kind of provisioning the users based on roles. So let's say a human resource user will have access to 5 human resource systems. So you just go in the identity management system and you create a human resource user, and they're automatic, on the back end of the identity management system, it goes and creates accounts into those endpoint systems automatically. So the administrator doesn't have to manually go in and create 5 or 6 accounts. Um, it seems a little simple, but when you're dealing with multiple users, multiple accounts, multiple system admins, it becomes complicated. And also when the users leave the organization, will the administrator remember to delete or modify access to all the 5 or 10 systems or 20 systems that a particular user has access to? And the same thing goes with roles. As the roles change, the identity management system will have a different role setup. So you're just assigned a particular role and the access is automatically granted. Whereas if you have uh, a user where basically the administrator is creating individual accounts and changing the role, and when you have like 20 systems or more, it becomes extremely difficult to uh, keep your systems under tight control, especially in a dynamic organization where things are changing frequently. And next is, identity and access management system will help you have an enterprise view of the user's identity. So, you take you in the identity access management system, you click on a user's name and you can see all the systems they have access to, roles they have provisioned. So it gives you an enterprise view of the user's identity. Again, other features of the identity and access IAM system is basically there's central identity provisioning or deprovisioning. What it means is you are creating, users, and so one is creating a user. Provisioning means we are actually, once you've created the user, you need to see which systems a user can access. Let's say maybe HR systems, and what roles they need to have in this HR system. So you cannot create everyone as an administrator to the HR system. So depending on the type of user, they may or may not have access to accounting, human resource, other systems. And depending on their role within the particular department, they may either be supervisor, administrator, or a general user with limited functions. So not only the identity management system is helping you create the users for each system and assigning roles, but also deprovisioning means removing the access when the user no longer needs it or the user leaves the organization. And that kind of directly relates to user lifecycle management. When the user changes roles, somebody in accounting is no longer working there and moved on to marketing, they don't need to have access to the accounting system. And also it helps you keep like a segregation of duties, which is important in accounting. Automation of help desk functions such as password reset, user profile management. So this is a little bit related to access management. And usually what we find is this third bullet is where organizations find the biggest return on investment. They can see things, the reduced workload and help desk. Basically, the access management system gives you features such as, forgot password, they click on a link, it goes and helps users update their profile or reset their password That's all kind of packaged within the identity and access management system. Um, Single sign-on. It's again, it's basically helping the user access resources once they've signed on to one application. You don't want to challenge the user for the same username password again and again when they go into different systems. So that's a feature that many of the identity and access management application packages come with, where once the user has logged in, they're even integrated with the Windows Active Directory. So user is logged into their computer. If they want to go to the HR system, if they are authorized, they can go directly to the HR system. They're not challenged. And the way it works programmatically is that the user does not see it, but internally, the credentials that are that the user used to log in, those are sent to the HR system, and the HR system says, okay, well, either it authenticates or and authorizes or not, and if everything, if the user is authenticated and authorized to access that particular HR system or accounting system, the user is able to go there without getting challenged for the same username password again. So that's single sign-on. Next is centrally managed access control for multiple applications. So this is talking about access management. So you have multiple applications, you have 50, 60 systems, depending on the size of the enterprise. You have a lot of systems, and you need to manage the access. So when the user puts their login, username, password, that username, password, basically how it works is on the web server there is a plugin for each application. Large enterprises have tens or hundreds of applications for each application, and usually they are on a web server. So on the web server, there is a plugin which acts like a gatekeeper or a policeman. So when the user tries to go to a particular application, let's say accounting system, the policeman says, is the user authenticated? Yes, no, no. Well, if the user is not authenticated, the user is taken to the or basically the access management system, um, and where the user sees the login and password screen. Um, the user enters their login password. The message goes to the policeman, or the plugin sends the request to a central access management system. The credentials are checked against the central directory of username and password. And if the user is authenticated and if the user is authorized to access that particular resource, the user is then, the policeman is told by the central access management policy server that, well, you are authorized, the user can access this resource, and the access is granted by the policeman or plugin that we described earlier. So that's how it works in the central management. That's one aspect of it. The other is, you can, because we have a central policy server or access management console, and you have different, you have these gatekeepers or policemen or um, plugins on each nodes that you have. You can centrally control who can access it. You can disable access. You can disable, external access. You can change timeouts, idle session timeouts. You can do a lot of configuration management centrally and have a standard across the organization, across the enterprise for all applications for security this way. So it's basically centrally managed access control. And this way you don't have these individual um, support teams for these different applications configuring their own security for each system in a haphazard way. And again, you don't need to build security into each application, as the bullet says, the third last bullet. And you can set up role-based access control based on the user's role. Yeah, they're given access to certain parts of the application, and overall it improves security as well. Now, how do you deploy these IAM environment? So traditionally, it's been always in-house installation. That's been there. It costs a lot of money usually. Now there are some pre-configured virtual machines available. Oracle has been pretty strong in that. They've been providing selling pre-configured virtual machines which have the baseline systems pre-configured. And now there are cloud-based IAM services available as well. So here are some of the leading traditional IAM vendors. So Computer Associates has Identity Managers and SiteMinder. Oracle has their Oracle Identity Manager, formerly Sun Identity Manager, and then Oracle Access Manager. And IBM has, again, Identity Manager, Tivoli Identity Manager that IBM bought, and Tivoli Access Manager, so Tim Tam solution by IBM. So these are the main leading um, uh, vendors for identity and access management software. Well, and this is how they rank um, and this is for the service. So now again, the other part was a cloud-based service. So this graphic kind of shows you what Gartner's Magic Quadrant for IAM cloud-based service providers, where they rank. And CA is there, as you can see, in the kind of high on the visionary side. Um, and apart from that, there are some smaller organizations. Simio Solutions is there as well, and kind of the niche players. They're a smaller organization, but just they've created some service for this, like a cloud-based service. So, and again, this is 2014 information. Now again, for IAM software, you can see IBM, Oracle are way up top as the leaders, and CA is kind of in the visionary quadrant. But yeah, I think having worked with CA and Oracle, like I know Oracle has invested heavily on it. And in Canada in general, I think CA is pretty strong, especially in Western Canada. Oracle is also there. A lot of Sun implementations um, are there, and now Sun, Oracle bought Sun, and organizations are trying to figure out what do they do, because the support for Sun Identity Manager has ended or is going to end soon, depending on which product version you have. So the only option then is to go with Oracle Identity Manager, which is kind of the next version up from Sun Identity Manager. Well, this gives you an overview of identity and access management, what it is, why you need it, who are the big players out there. If you have any questions or need help with identity and access management strategy, roadmap, use cases, return on investment, ROI calculations, and whether it's worth it for you to implement some identity and access management solution, or testing of IAM solutions, please go ahead and you can contact me at the email listed here, or you can call us at the number listed here as well. Thank you for attending, and have yourself a great afternoon.